It's great to have you.
Time, man.
It's been a while.
It's been a while. 9 years.
9 years. I apologise for not the face-to-face, but obviously I've seen the growth, man, just seeing what you're doing. Man. And just explain to everybody who's watching PowerTalk who you are, what you do, what you're about, bro.
It's always a hard one because I never know what hat I'm wearing on any given day. But I guess the hats that I go by on a day-to-day is I'm a criminologist, urban youth specialist, and also a lecturer at a local university in Birmingham, UCB.
Wow. That is, that's a lot to be carrying. Lecturer, what are you lecturing in exactly?
So I lecture criminology and criminal justice.
Right.
I also run a program called Responding to Gangs and Serious Youth Violence, which is the only program running in the country. And also teach youth and community work. So really frontline professionals that are going out to work in either youth communities or families.
And how did you get into this? And take us back a little bit. Tell us your journey. Obviously, growing up, you got that Birmingham accent, so I'm going to assume that you grew up in Birmingham. Tell us a little bit about that, just your journey and how you came from growing up in Birmingham to becoming a criminologist, studying your PhD, all that type of stuff. How did that all come about?
The journey's a long one.
That's all right.
I'll just give highlights.
Give me some highlights.
So, Bromtown, Birmingham, inner city boy, Hockley, front line, where I come from in Birmingham. Live with my mum and dad, older sibling, older brother. Childhood was relatively quite fine. Both of my parents have worked in education and still work in education. Come from a very strong family. The Pinkney name in Birmingham in the West Midlands is a big name. So my grandmother and grandfather, my grandmother specifically, Mavis Pinkney, opened up a project called the Nightingale Project in the early 70s. 60s going into the 70s following the Windrush when a lot of the Caribbean communities were coming. And she set up a community organisation from her household. So a lot of our modern day activists within the West Midlands and certain parts of the country, were children and young people that kind of came through that. And then my grandmother was one of the pioneers to kind of open up and establish the Muhammad Ali Centre. So when Muhammad Ali came many years ago to Birmingham, he came to my grandmother's house. So my family kind of rings bells for a lot of the elders in the community, for the Caribbean, Jamaican community specifically. And then a lot of my uncles and aunties have kind of gone into activism and always kind of done community projects and whatnot. So it's been part of my DNA, community work, I guess. Like with most young teenagers, I kind of lost my way at some point, fell out of school, wasn't really interested in education, left school with only 2 GCSEs, went to college, was in and out of college. The usual stuff started hanging around with the wrong crowds, wrong individuals, then kind of started to slip, doing kind of, petty crime onto more violent type of things I was engaged in. Nothing I'm ever proud about, but that was kind of my journey. I think the good thing about me is that I always had something to bounce back to. As I noticed with a lot of my friends, and when I reflect on that now, when we were growing up, I was the only household with another family in front of us. We're the only 2 households that had a father in the household. So I always had that distraction, I want to go out. My dad was like, come in at the house. So you always want to do something. It's always like, your dad's calling you again. So I was always that kid that get laughed at because my dad was always pulling me in. But when I think about that kind of long term now, all of that stuff was quite beneficial in the sense that, I had always somebody that was going to pull me back in. So anytime that I slipped, I always had that chance to get back to that foundation. So when I kind of, got to college, I used to play basketball. So basketball became a sport that I was really interested in. It really kind of took me away from being in the ends every single day. But my dad also always tell me that pay attention to your education as well. Don't just think about the basketball. So I had ambitions to go to America. We were playing for some of the best teams in the Midlands at the time. We were winning all of the regional cups and we were doing bits. And then the English Cup finals, Birmingham versus East Durham.
Okay.
I wasn't supposed to play that game because we had another cup final the 2 days after. So we had a kind of strategy that these 6 or 7 players were gonna take the lead, and then when it gets to the second game, we're gonna reserve some of the other players. Went on. I don't think I was on the court 20 seconds. I just remember the ball going up, rebounded. I was running, a guy pushed me, and my right knee just kind of planted and continued going.
Wow.
So I ruptured my ACL. which meant then I had to have an ACL reconstruction on my
How old
knee.
are you at this point?
So I was 18, 19. So I was still at college because I got kicked out of my first college. And in the second college was a situation where, because I was so good at basketball at the time, the college was, them days were just letting people in because we were good credibility to the college, whereas it's a little bit different now. But them days it was just, just come as long as you're playing for, whether it's football or whether it's badminton or whether it's the basketball team, they were just happy to have you there. So I like with a lot of my kind of peers, me and another guy was the oldest out of the whole group because, as I said, we already had done 2 years in college and then had to do college all over again. So ACL, reconstruction, I would say it was one of my most probably depressing times.
Yeah, how did you kind of deal with that? Because obviously you had dreams and hopes of doing one thing, and then what actually happened was it was just like taken away in a moment. How did you respond to that as a young man?
Well, it was like Monday to Friday, college, weekends always playing away to nothing. Couldn't go college because I couldn't walk. Couldn't play games, so I know obviously I'm watching my boys and they're saying, they're going to America, and some are saying they're going to Europe to play and whatnot, and they're getting opportunities to play in college abroad, and I'm just sitting there like, and then I always had my dad saying, see, I told you should have paid attention in college. So he had kind of advised me to talk to one of his friends, and his friend worked for Birmingham Youth Service, and we used to have something called Connections in Birmingham. And it was kind of like a drop-in centre that was based in the Birmingham City Library. And he had a friend named Wezai. He was like a family friend. And I first went there and I met Wezai, big Rasta, him. And there was a Scottish woman named Christine and an Asian lady named Yasmin. And they were the 3 youth workers that used to work there. So I used to go there every single day and I was just moaning, I can't do what I want to do. That's it now. I don't really want to do the course because I was doing a sporting course. Didn't want to do it. And kind of like most young people, they do courses because they like the sport, but it was nothing that was going to give me any job opportunities once I was going to finish. And they said, you'd be a good youth worker. I was like, listen, I'm not really interested in doing youth work because at the same time, I used to also support my coach, used to do kind of child activities like in the Easter, summer, any half terms, anything like that. I used to always help out and do coaching. So we got paid for kind of doing basketball drills with these young kids, but I didn't really consider it youth work. So when they was kind of giving me the principles of what youth work is all about, they're saying you do some of that stuff anyway. And again, I was still just like, nah, it's not really for me. And they were on at me every single day when I was going up there and whatnot. And I said, I'll jump on one of these courses. It was an introduction to youth work that was running from the Birmingham Youth Service. It was youth workers offering kids opportunities if they were interested in youth work to know what it was all about. But the first program was based in a youth centre outside of my ends in a place called Newtown. And I was just like, nah, I'm going to this course. So they was like, what's your problem? Technically, I didn't have no problems with nobody, but as you know, when you grow up in certain environments, you're always told by the elders, you don't go over to that postcode because they're the ops, they're the enemy. Something's going to happen to you. So I always had that fear of going into another community, another area, and thinking something was going to happen. So I'm there panicking, thinking, I'm going to get caught slipping. I'm going to catch up with a man and we're going to have to fight and all of these things. And the youth workers was like, I don't know what's wrong with you. So they got me a taxi. Okay. So it was one of those situations where they put me in a taxi. But when I got there and I started doing the course, I started to realize that I didn't have no problems with nobody and I actually enjoyed the course. So I kind of had a thirst for wanting to know a little bit more. And then I went on it was a introduction to youth. It was like a foundation to something to do with youth and community or whatnot. So it wasn't like at level 3. It was like probably like a level 1 or level 2. It was very basic. I think it was like a 6-7 week program that was at the youth centre from 6 till 8. Went on to that program and then I kind of started to realise that, I kind of like this. And then we're telling me of obviously them days, that's when youth service used to pay. So I was saying, so they were saying, you're like 28 grand job. And I'm sitting there thinking like, yeah. So I'm thinking, I want to jump on this. So then as I said, because my family are quite known and my family know a lot of people, my dad and my mum was in conversation with my local pastor's wife, and she was like an area officer. And she came to my dad and said that, if Craig's interested in doing any courses, I work for the council and she works at the training centre. So she gave my dad a training book and she said, any course that Craig wants to do, they're only like short courses, he can jump on them. So my dad was like, yo, your leg mash up. Like, yo, jump on to these courses. So I looked through the book and it was like counselling, working with difficult young people, working with difficulties, autism, management, supervising skills. So it was about 8 or 9 courses. Some of them were like 1 day, some of them were like 3 days, and I practically done most of the book. Yeah. But what I was doing at the time was I was skipping college to go to so even though I was skipping college and they were screwing at me for the fact that I was skipping college, but I was actually doing something.
You weren't skipping college to do foolishness?
Nah, so I was there actually trying to get onto the courses. So then it got to a position where Christine and Yasmin, the youth workers at the time, were just like, yo, Craig, I think you should try go university. And I'm just like, nah. So she's like, obviously, you've done college. You've at least completed your first year before you got kicked out the first one. The second one, you're almost at the end of your diploma. You're not playing basketball. You're doing all of these little courses. You might as well try and get somewhere. So I'm like, not really interested in the university thing. But you know what? It's one of those ones where if they believe in me, then I'm just going to follow what you're saying. So I always say this to young people. Those youth workers filled out my application form. I did not fill out my application form. They did it for me. So sent it off, and then I got 2 interviews. So one was at Derby University and one was at De Montfort University. So I went to Derby University, kind of had a conversation with the people that was there and had my record of achievement, because my thing was, even though my qualifications are not up to speed, just look what I've done. That was kind of my strength in the kind of conversation. And they were kind of looking at it saying, you know what, we do well, whatnot. And I lost my record of achievement coming back to Brum. And I was just like, how am I going to prove to these people now that I'm going to do it? So my thing was, well, I might as well go Derby, because they physically seen the record of achievement, and I was kind of cool with what they were saying. So when I went to Leicester now, I kind of liked the vibe of Leicester City, but I didn't have my record of achievement. So I've gone there, and I've always said that I've got the gift of the gab. So if you put me in a situation, my belief is you put me in an interview, I'm going to get the job. I've always had that belief. So I'm talking. I'm noticing the woman just nodding, and I'm talking. And I said, listen, reality is that I might not have the qualifications that's enough for me to get onto this program, but based on my knowledge, my expertise, and the things that I've seen in my life, can not just only benefit the course, but also benefit peers that are going to be on the course. Yeah. And I don't know if that made the woman think, you know what? Yeah. So they made me do like a little handwritten test to see what my writing ability was like, and they gave me an offer. Amazing. So moved to De Montfort, and done a degree in youth and community development. And it was a struggle. The first 2 years, it's funny because I have this conversation a lot now with like my parents and whatnot. I messed about my first 2 years. It was only my 3rd year where really things changed. And that was when I met Dr. Carlton Howson. And I would say he was probably the 3rd man in my life that really challenged me at a level where my dad would challenge me at. And he basically called me a hypocrite. He was just like, you know what, I don't get why you are here doing this degree, but there's something about you that I know that you're doing negative, because what I was doing was going back to Brum and linking cousins and friends and just doing loads of madness. And he was saying, like, you got 1 foot in and 1 foot out, like, you're not making sense of what you're doing. And it bothered me. It bothered me to the point where I was like, nah, I don't like this man. But he was so articulate. I mean, like Dr. Carlton Howson was like, he looked like a Black Panther, he dressed like a Black Panther. I'm talking boots, black jeans, black t-shirt, berry on his head. But the most articulate man I've ever heard at that particular time. And I'd sit in his lectures and he'd always look at me saying, Craig, do you know what I'm talking about? And I'd be like, nah, but I will get you at some point. And that was me telling myself that I'm going to get this at some point. And I decided that I was going to go for a dyslexic test. I don't know what took me so long to go for the test, and I discovered I was dyslexic. So then it made me reflect on all of the times in school, all of the times in college where I switched off, and it was because I had a deficit, and I would always hide from that particular deficit. So a teacher would just put it on me like, I need you to read that and then tell me what you learned from that story or whatnot, and I wouldn't know how to do it. So my easiest thing was to kick off, to start laughing, making a joke. Everyone started laughing, which meant I was going to get kicked out of the session. So a lot of those things were distractions to not kind of engage with the fact that I had a challenge in terms of my learning, and I didn't want that to be exposed. And I find that happens with a lot of young people when we're talking about education. They do things, and I remember my friend Anthony Kavanagh, he couldn't read. So the moment the teacher would say something, he'd always start kicking off. And that was just his response of, I'm not going to get exposed and feel shame in front of anybody in this type of room. And that's what it kind of was. And then so the third year, I would say I became a student, which meant then my grades weren't great. But I got my degree. And it's funny because I remember my mum crying. And I always remember all my educational journey. I always remember mum crying because of the things that I'd done negative or the things that I'd done wrong. And the first time I seen her cry because I'd done something good, and even that was confusing. And then that's when it all started. Yeah. So I was looking in the Evening Mail before it became the Birmingham Mail, and there used to be this advert for a youth work post in a youth centre called Oakland Youth Centre. Now, that youth centre was a historic youth centre in Birmingham, in Handsworth particularly. Everybody used to go there growing up. Even my parents' wedding reception was there, and it was always used for like community events, but there was a murder that took place a number of years before at the community centre, which meant they kind of stopped all community type of engagements and only used it for youth services. But like with community things, people still think it's still related to the murder. So from a youth service perspective, young people just wasn't attending. So I was seeing this ad every single week, and it said 27 something. And I'm just like, listen, I've got the degree. This is what I'm qualified for. So I applied for it. Now, when I went to the interview, I seen one of the youth workers that trained me on the introduction to youth work, which I told you about. So I'm just saying, there's no way I'm getting this job then. Well, again, put me in that situation in an interview. I got the gift of the gab, made it happen. So the first week I started that job, I quickly realized why nobody was applying for it. You know, I'd heard reports of members of staff being attacked, staff going off on stress, young people are trying to smash up the building and whatnot. And one of the things that I kind of learned that there was like a ban. I know I have young people that were in the building, so these were like young people that may have been in gangs, young people that had done crime or actually were involved in smashing up the building. And I just said, if in order for us, this thing to work, we have to ignore the ban. We have to just start fresh. And that's what we did. Yeah. And I think because obviously growing up in Hockley, which is right next door to Handsworth, you know, me going to school with a lot of guys in the community, living next door to a lot of individuals that were kind of well known, and obviously family members that are connected to certain type of individual, that was kind of my rites of passage. Yeah. So when young people would come in the building, even though they might have been disrespectful, it was the fact that I knew their older brothers. Yeah. So one of the things that I did was one of the sessions was I invited a couple of the people that I considered my elders. And then they came to the session. So man are like, how do you know my man? And that's when certain things started to change. So it was like some simple things like signing in on the registry. You know, young people, they're not signing their name for all the same reasons why I didn't want to do things. I probably can't read and I can't write. So, it's the Illuminati. I don't want to do this, the government. I'm not writing my name down and all that other stuff. So then write Jay-Z or Beyonce and all of these things and whatnot. So one of the things I realized was that I needed to memorize people's names. So they didn't have to do that. But then at the same time, they had respect coming in the building because they knew that I was linked to certain types of individuals. And then whilst I was at Oakland Youth Centre and I started to see kind of loads of different types of people, I would say that's when really kind of my passion for wanting to understand young people a little bit more really kind of started to develop. And then I kind of wanted to educate myself much more. And as I said, in my third year, I became a student. Yeah. So now I had a thirst for knowledge. Yeah. So then I decided to do a kind of diploma, but I couldn't get on because, again, my grades weren't great from my thing. And then I went on to gangology.
Yes.
Now, why that is significant, and this is where we link, is because at that time I was working with a group of young men that wanted to come to an event Napoleon had come over from America, or
explaining
through Raymond Douglas.
Yeah. For the people who don't know.
So he was one of the ex-outlaws with Tupac.
Right.
And he, again, was one of the original members of the Outlaws. And, you know, you remember the days when the Biggie Smalls and Tupac beef and whatnot. But this man had changed his life and embraced faith and came to Islam and was kind of showing young people that the gangster lifestyle that he had was not benefiting him and didn't benefit him. And it was like a talk to the youth. But where Raymond Douglas had the session, it was one of those spaces in Birmingham where you just kind of don't know. So I called him and said, listen, I got about 7 boys that I want to bring there, but I just want to make sure what other parties are bringing young people. And I don't know what that conversation sparked for Ray, but it made him contact me a couple of weeks later and say to me, yo, I'm running this program called Gangology. It's a 3-day training course. Do you want to jump on? So me, I'm excited, like, yeah, cool. Gone to the city council, like, yo, this 3-day course with the young people I'm working with in this building, it makes perfect sense. And they was just like, nah, they're not. So I did contact Ray and said, you know what, they're saying, nah, I can't do it and jump on. So I don't want to put Ray into it, but he hollered at me and said, yo, you can go on the first day for free. Okay. So I said, you know what, blessings for that. You know, so I've jumped on, and that's when I met everyone. And for me, I was significant because then when the end of day 1, Ray said, you know what, just come for the 3 days, and that's between me and you. So not to bait him what that was. But why it was significant because day 3, a man with white hair, skinny, talks non-stop. The session started at 9 o'clock and I got there at 8:30, and when I walked into the room, this man was talking and I thought I was late. And that was Dr. Martin Glynn. And that man spoke so profound about gangs and violence, and it was information that I've never heard before. And it got me, because bearing in mind, I'm thinking I'm late. Now, 9 o'clock's coming now, and he's talking. And bearing in mind, on day 1, Ray did set up that scenario of telling us that if we came up with a program or project to engage with joint enterprise, that we were going to get like some sort of spa package or whatnot. So I had my situation on point. I phoned the man them from jail and all of them. So they was like, yeah, this is what you should be doing. So I was like, yo, my project is 10 out of 10. So when this man started talking, he was doing something in me that showed me that I'm not a scholar. That's what Martin showed me, that I'm not a scholar. There's a lot of people that talk about gangs that kind of go on TV and everybody's having this conversation about gangs and violence. But he was coming from a place of information and knowledge, and that's why I call him the walking book. So by the time it came to me, everything that I thought I knew about gangs and violence, it just went out the window, and that's how, I'd say, the birth of what Craig was all about then started. Wow. Because if you remember, I told everybody to close their eyes, and then I remember I banged the table, and everybody kind of jumped up, and I said, I don't know what that sound is. But my lifelong journey is about discovering and understanding that sound.
Yeah, that sound almost gave me a heart attack. I was there. I've done it a few times.
It was real.
Yeah.
And I think that's when the journey started. So then linking then with Dr. Martin Glynn, I became his student. And you might not know this, but on the break time, you might remember 94% of the people that were there stopped talking to him because he was presenting information. And you got to remember in mind that there was heads of service in that building, and he was saying that most of the interventions that you're running are not working and they're not going to work. But you got to understand that people are still going to take money to do things that are not working and try and make it out to the society that these things do work. And I came to him and said, you don't know me and I don't know you, but you are going to be my mentor. That's how I approached him. And I think took his number within a week. I was at his house. So every morning before I went to work, I used to go and learn from him. I want to understand what these terminologies mean. I want to understand what it is. And I'd bring him to Oakland's and I'd show him certain young people that I was working with and kind of give him kind of scenarios. And even when there was like fights or something about to kick off or a man wants to shoot someone or stab someone, I'd phone him and say, yo, what do I do? So Martin's kind of understanding and theorizing of things, I would say I brought it into practice. Yeah. So that's why he was the book and I was the action man. So when Martin went to America and he was doing his PhD at that particular time, he was saying to me, you need to do your master's degree. And that's why I signed up to the master's degree. And I wanted to understand violence, and I want to understand street violence and how it relates to our young people in our communities. And that's why I've done my dissertation focused on gangs and violence and the transitional stages, looking at lifelong journeys of the points of where young people can get caught up versus where are the places where we can actually try and stop all the system from criminality. And I think the beautiful thing about that whole process is that when I graduated from my master's degree, Martin graduated for his PhD, so we graduated on the same day. So we've got a significant picture that is the legacy of what I'm all about.
And it's intergenerational, which is something we don't see often, the intergenerational connection of the older and the younger coming through the academia.